Most people go through life believing they are trapped by forces outside their control. They describe their situation as if it were a fixed reality, the family they were born into, the opportunities they never had, the personality they believe they possess, the past they cannot change. From the outside, these explanations sound logical, even mature. They offer relief, they remove guilt, they create the feeling that life simply happened to them. But Jean-Paul Sartre saw something deeply troubling in this way of thinking. According to Sartre, when a person explains their life entirely through circumstances, they are not being honest. They are protecting themselves from what he believed to be the most uncomfortable truth of human existence, that the individual is radically free and therefore fully responsible for what they become. Sartre argued that human beings are experts at avoiding this responsibility. They don't usually deny freedom openly. Instead, they disguise the denial in reasonable language. They say they had no choice. They say they are just like this. They say they can't act differently right now. Over time, these statements stop sounding like excuses and start feeling like facts. This is what Sartre called bad faith, a subtle but powerful form of self-deception where a person lies to themselves in order to escape the weight of freedom. Because freedom, in Sartre's philosophy, is not a pleasant idea. It is not about doing whatever one wants. It is the realization that there is no predefined essence, no inner blueprint, no destiny to fall back on. There is only existence, and the constant demand to choose what to do with it. Even refusing to choose is still a choice. Even surrendering control to others is an act of responsibility. This video examines that uncomfortable reality. It explores why people cling to excuses, how those excuses quietly shape identity, and why Sartre believed that most individuals spend their entire lives running from a freedom they claim to want. By the end, it becomes clear that excuses are not harmless explanations. They are structures that imprison the individual from the inside. And once that structure is seen clearly, something irreversible begins. Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy strikes at the very foundation of how most people understand themselves. In a world obsessed with identity, personality tests, psychological labels, and social roles, Sartre drops a philosophical bomb. You are not anything until you choose to be. This is not metaphor, it is not poetic language, it is a brutal existential truth, and one that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. To Sartre, existence precedes essence. This means that human beings are not born with a fixed purpose, a stable identity, or any predetermined nature. You are not an introvert by destiny. You are not doomed by your past. You are not shaped irreversibly by your trauma. These may be facts of your situation, what Sartre calls facticity, but they do not define you. What defines you is how you respond. This is where Sartre's idea becomes truly uncomfortable. Freedom is not optional. You don't get to choose whether you are free, only what you will do with that freedom. Even if you say, "I can't change," even if you surrender to your habits, or follow the expectations of others, or remain silent in the face of injustice, you are still choosing. There is no escape hatch. Even not acting is an action. Sartre calls this condition the condemnation to freedom. It's a paradox. We are born without asking, thrown into a world we did not design, with no manual, no divine command, and no objective meaning. And yet, from the moment we become conscious, we are burdened with the task of giving our life a direction. This is not freedom as modern society likes to sell it. The shallow idea of doing whatever you want. Sartre's freedom is deeper, more terrifying. It is the realization that everything is permitted, not because there are no consequences, but because there are no excuses. And this is where the real weight comes in. Because if you truly accepted this freedom, if you really believe that every moment is a chance to redefine yourself, then you would also have to admit that your current life is not an accident. It is not the fault of your parents, your job, your childhood, or your DNA. It is the result of your choices. Not just the big decisions, but the micro choices: to conform, to remain silent, to delay, to numb, to settle. All of it. This weight, the pressure of being the sole author of your life, creates what Sartre called existential anguish. It's not just anxiety. It's the deep, disorienting terror that comes when you realize there is no one else to blame. That your life is not happening to you. It is being authored by you, moment by moment. And with this terror comes a temptation. The temptation to escape into roles, identities, systems, and beliefs that seem to offer stability. You tell yourself you're just not the type of person who does X. You convince yourself that you had to take that job, stay in that relationship, maintain that image. But these are not facts. They are choices disguised as inevitabilities. This, Sartre says, is bad faith. The refusal to acknowledge one's freedom by pretending to be a fixed object, rather than a free subject. You become like a waiter who performs his role so perfectly that he forgets he is a human being playing a role. You become your job title. You become your trauma. You become your diagnosis. And in doing so, you abandon your freedom in exchange for psychological comfort. But here is the catch. Even this act of self-deception is a choice. Even your escape from freedom is an exercise of it. You cannot stop being free. You can only stop being honest about it. And that leads us to a painful realization. Most of the limitations we experience are not imposed by the world, but manufactured by the self. Through 1,000 small acts of avoidance, fear, and rationalization, we build a life that looks like a prison, but was, in truth, constructed brick by brick with our own hands. So the question is no longer, are you free? You already are. The real question is, what have you been using your freedom to avoid? And even more disturbingly, what if all the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what's possible are nothing more than excuses to protect yourself from this terrifying freedom? In the next section, we're going to dig deeper into these stories, the subtle, sophisticated lies we call reasons, and we'll see how Sartre dismantles each one, exposing the psychological mechanics of self-sabotage hidden behind every excuse. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. If Sartre was right, and we are indeed radically free, then every excuse we make is more than just a harmless justification. It's a mechanism of bad faith, a psychological strategy designed to protect us from the weight of our own freedom. And the most disturbing part, most of us don't even realize we're doing it. Excuses are seductive because they create the illusion of stability. They allow us to maintain a coherent story about ourselves without facing the existential discomfort of change. They are the emotional equivalent of guardrails. They keep us from veering into the terrifying truth that at any moment we could choose differently and become someone else entirely. Sartre saw this as a kind of self-imposed hypnosis. We repeat phrases like, "I'm just not that kind of person," or "I can't because of my past," or "I have no choice," until they solidify into identity. And once they do, they become cages we willingly lock ourselves inside. Let's be clear. Excuses don't always sound like lies. In fact, they often sound reasonable, even responsible. Take, for example, "I can't leave this job because I have bills to pay." On the surface, this sounds like a fact. But Sartre would challenge you to dig deeper. Is it true that you can't, or is it that you won't because the alternative is risky, uncertain, uncomfortable? You could leave. You simply fear the consequences of that freedom. That's not a lack of choice. That's a choice hidden beneath fear. This is what makes Sartre's philosophy so confronting. He doesn't deny that circumstances matter, only that they determine you. He distinguishes between facticity and transcendence. Facticity is the raw material of your existence, your history, your body, your environment. You didn't choose where you were born or what happened to you as a child. These are facts. But transcendence is your capacity to go beyond those facts, to respond, reinterpret, and act in ways that aren't dictated by them. When you treat facticity as destiny, you erase your transcendence and enter into bad faith. Consider the excuse, "I'm just a shy person." Sartre would argue that you are not being shy. You are choosing to act shyly, moment after moment, and then labeling that behavior as fixed identity. You are not a shy person. You are a person who consistently makes shy choices, perhaps to avoid vulnerability or exposure. But at any time, you could experiment with other choices. You simply don't, because the risk of change threatens the safety of the narrative you've built. Another common one. My past made me this way. Sartre would say, no, your past happened, but its meaning is being created in the present. Two people with identical childhoods can live radically different lives depending on how they interpret and respond to that past. Trauma may shape your experience, but it doesn't write your future. Only you do. The moment you use your past as an unchangeable explanation for your present, you're surrendering your freedom under the disguise of realism. And then there's perhaps the most insidious excuse of all. If I had more time, money, support, confidence, then I would pursue what I really want. This is the excuse that builds a false future to avoid the present. It creates the illusion that you're on the path, but only when the perfect conditions arrive. But they never will. This is a delay tactic dressed up as hope. In reality, you are already choosing not to act and blaming it on a hypothetical version of reality that may never come. Sartre's point is not to shame you, it's to wake you up. Every time you say, I can't, you should stop and ask, what am I really avoiding? The answer is often this: the responsibility of knowing that I can. That is the price of freedom. And that is why most people would rather feel stuck than free, because freedom is terrifying. It means you are the one creating your life, whether you admit it or not. Excuses are not protection. They are avoidance. They don't save you from hardship. They save you from responsibility. But in doing so, they also save you from growth, transformation, and ultimately, authenticity. When you choose to live by excuses, you are not escaping pain. You are choosing a different kind of pain, the pain of becoming a passive observer in your own life. Which brings us to the breaking point, the moment when the lies no longer work. What happens when someone finally stops making excuses? What does it feel like to confront the full force of existential freedom, without filters, without escape routes? In the next section, we'll face this moment of truth and explore what Sartre called anguish, the terrifying, liberating realization that your life is yours alone. There comes a moment, subtle, quiet, but irreversible, when a person stops believing in their own excuses. It might be triggered by a loss, a failure, a confrontation, or a deep internal exhaustion. But whatever the cause, what follows is not peace or relief. It is anguish, the emotional and psychological vertigo that Sartre described as the unavoidable consequence of facing one's own radical freedom. Sartre didn't romanticize this moment. He didn't paint it as enlightenment or awakening. He called it what it is, a crisis. Because when the scaffolding of excuses collapses, nothing remains to hold the self up. No identity, no narrative, no justification. What you are left with is an open abyss of possibility, and the terrifying knowledge that you, and only you, are responsible for what comes next. This is existential anguish, not anxiety in the clinical sense, Not stress from external pressure, but a deeper, more primal kind of fear. It is the fear that arises when all illusions of certainty vanish and you are left staring into the face of your own freedom. For the first time, you realize no one is coming to save you. There is no external script, no destiny, no cosmic map. There is only the raw material of your existence. And the question, what will I do with it? And here's the paradox. Most people say they want freedom, but when they actually touch it, when they feel the weight of being able to choose anything, become anything, change everything, they recoil. Because freedom is not light. It is not liberating in the way people imagine. It is heavy, overwhelming. It destroys the comfort of blame. It eliminates the illusion that life is happening to you. In Sartre's words, it makes you naked before the world, stripped of defenses, exposed to yourself. This is why Sartre described freedom not as a right, but as a condemnation. You did not ask to exist, but now that you do, you are condemned to carry the full responsibility of that existence. You cannot opt out. Even passivity is a decision. Even silence is a statement. Even running from yourself is an act of self-authorship. And yet, hidden inside this terror is something profound: authenticity. Because when the excuses fall away and the weight of freedom fully lands, for the first time, you are in contact with what Sartre considered to be the most honest part of human existence. You are no longer playing a role. You are no longer lying to yourself. You are standing in the truth. Not a comfortable truth, but a real one. It's in this moment of anguish that something else becomes possible: creation. If you are nothing but your choices, then you can become something else. Not someday, but now. And this is where the fear becomes power. The same freedom that once seemed unbearable becomes the only source of genuine transformation. But transformation is not automatic. It requires a conscious commitment to responsibility, a decision to no longer hide behind identities, roles, or justifications. It demands a new relationship with yourself, one where every thought, action, and intention is owned, not explained away. This is not just a philosophical idea, it is a lived experience. And it begins with a single shift: the willingness to face the truth without flinching. So, what happens next? Once the excuses are gone, and the weight of freedom is fully accepted, what does it actually look like to live authentically? To own your life without lies, without blame, and without retreat? That's the path we explore in the next section: the radical practice of living in good faith. Once a person confronts the terrifying weight of their freedom, once they feel the collapse of every excuse and stand face to face with the raw truth of their own responsibility, they arrive at a crossroads. This is where most turn back. They return to the comfort of roles, identities, and rationalizations. They numb themselves with distractions, adopt socially approved narratives, and resume the performance of being someone they never truly chose to be. But for those who are willing to continue forward, who refuse to look away, there is a different path. Sartre called it living in good faith. Good faith is not about morality, religion, or being a good person. In Sartre's philosophy, good faith is the act of embracing one's freedom with full awareness, of refusing to lie to oneself about the fact that every action, every inaction, every thought, and every value is chosen. It is a state of brutal honesty, not with others, but with the self. To live in good faith means recognizing that you are not a fixed being, you are a becoming, a constant unfolding project. And with that comes an unbearable power, the power to reinvent who you are at any moment. This is not easy. It requires vigilance. Sartre never claimed that living authentically was natural or effortless. On the contrary, bad faith is the default mode of human life. It is easier, safer, and socially rewarded. Most people are encouraged to adopt stable identities, to say, "I am this," or "I am that," because it makes them legible to others. Society prefers predictability over freedom. Culture provides templates: the professional, the parent, the rebel, the victim, the spiritual seeker. These roles come with behaviors, expectations, even emotional scripts. And most people, exhausted by the weight of freedom, slip into these roles and begin to forget they are playing a part. But the person living in good faith never forgets. They may still play roles. Sartre never said authenticity meant abandoning society, but they do so consciously, aware that they are choosing to play them and that they could choose differently. This awareness changes everything. It dissolves the illusion of essence. It burns away the comfort of "I have no choice." It replaces the language of fate with the language of authorship. And perhaps most importantly, it destroys the temptation of self-pity. When you live in good faith, you no longer get to say, "I am like this because of what happened to me." Instead, you say, "This is how I've chosen to respond to what happened." That shift, from passive to active, from determined to choosing, is the essence of existential authenticity. It is not glamorous. It doesn't guarantee happiness. In fact, Sartre was clear. Authenticity often leads to discomfort, isolation, and existential tension. But it also leads to something far more powerful than comfort. It leads to clarity. From this clarity, a new kind of life begins to emerge, one not driven by fear, habit, or social expectation, but by conscious intention. The authentic individual becomes a project, not a product. Every action becomes a brushstroke in the painting of their own existence. Even failure, regret, and pain are no longer excuses, but material, raw ingredients for self-creation. But authenticity is not just an idea. It is a discipline, a daily confrontation with the tendency to drift back into bad faith. It means catching yourself when you say, "I have to," and asking, "Is that true, or is it easier than choosing?" It means listening carefully for the voice that says, "I'm not that kind of person," and challenging it with, "Who says? Who decided that?" It means recognizing that every complaint, every resignation, every act of procrastination may be a subtle form of self-denial. Living in good faith is not a one-time decision. It is a constant return, a refusal to be defined by the past or confined by fear. It is, in the deepest sense, freedom lived out loud. But what does this look like in action? How can one begin to practice this kind of radical responsibility, not just in theory, but in everyday life? In the next section, we'll break down 5 practical ways to disrupt the cycle of self-deception and start building a life rooted in conscious, authentic choice. Sartre gave us the theory. Now, let's see how it becomes transformation. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Sartre's philosophy isn't meant to stay on the page. It is not intellectual decoration. It is a call to action, a philosophical knife designed to cut through illusions and force you into direct confrontation with your own freedom. But awareness alone is not enough. Knowing you are free doesn't guarantee that you'll act like it. Freedom must be exercised, trained, and reclaimed, especially in a world that constantly tempts you to abandon it. So what does that look like in practice? How does someone live Sartre's ideas in the chaos of modern life, with its routines, obligations, and emotional complexity? Sartre never laid out a step-by-step self-help manual, but his writings point toward a set of practices, disciplines of honesty, awareness, and deliberate action that pull you out of bad faith and into existential authorship. Here are 5 of the most powerful. 1. Catch yourself in the act of lying to yourself. Bad faith doesn't announce itself. It hides behind phrases like, "I can't," "I should," "I have to," or "that's just the way I am." The first step toward existential authenticity is to become ruthlessly aware of your language. Each time you use one of these phrases, pause and interrogate it. Ask yourself, is this a fact? Or is it a convenient story I'm telling to avoid responsibility? Then rephrase it with brutal honesty. "I can't quit this job" becomes, "I'm choosing not to quit this job because I fear financial instability." "I'm just not a confident person" becomes, "I've consistently chosen to avoid behaviors that build confidence." This simple act of rewording turns passive self-narratives into active recognitions of choice. It reclaims your agency, not just intellectually, but emotionally. 2. Define your fundamental project. Sartre believed that every person is unconsciously engaged in what he called a fundamental project, a guiding intention that shapes all your actions, even when you don't realize it. For one person, the project might be never disappoint anyone. For another, prove I'm smarter than everyone else. For another, stay safe by never taking risks. Your task is to uncover yours. What are your patterns trying to achieve? What kind of person are you trying to be through your daily actions? Not your ideals, but your reality? Once uncovered, you have two choices. Either take ownership of that project and pursue it consciously, or reject it and choose a new one. But either way, you are responsible for the project you're living. There is no neutral state. Not choosing is itself a choice. 3. Practice consequence without justification. We're trained from childhood to explain our behavior, to justify it, to soften it. But Sartre believed that real freedom begins when you own your actions without excuses. When you choose something, anything, and then simply accept the consequences without deflection. This doesn't mean being reckless or indifferent. It means acting from a place of clarity and then resisting the impulse to defend yourself. The next time you make a decision and feel the urge to say, "I had to," or "it wasn't my fault," stop. Say instead, "I chose X. Y happened. I accept that." This small but powerful practice builds the emotional muscle of ownership. It removes the psychological escape routes that lead back into bad faith. 4. Break your identity script. Deliberately. One of the most direct ways to confront your freedom is to challenge the labels you've internalized. If you think of yourself as not assertive, go have a difficult conversation. If you believe you're bad with money, spend an hour studying personal finance. If you always say, "I'm not the kind of person who," become that person, even for a moment. These small, intentional acts disrupt the illusion of a fixed self. They remind you that identity is not discovered, it is created. You are not a noun, you are a verb, and every behavior is a brushstroke in the story of who you are becoming. 5. Learn to sit in the discomfort of freedom. This may be the most difficult and the most important a practice of all. When you stop running from your freedom, you will feel it in your body. A sense of pressure, a dizziness, a discomfort that makes you want to distract yourself, numb yourself, or fall back into autopilot. This is the anguish Sartre spoke of, and it is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something real is happening. When it arises, don't flee. Sit with it. Let it burn. Let it strip away the layers of false identity, false necessity, and false helplessness. Because beneath that anguish lies something most people never reach: the raw, terrifying power to shape yourself. None of these practices are easy. They are confrontational by design. They will trigger resistance, emotional pushback, even grief. Because you are not just letting go of lies, you are letting go of the person you became in order to survive them. But in that loss is the beginning of true authorship. Not of the life you were given, but the life you will now create. Still, even with these practices, Sartre's philosophy leaves us with an uncomfortable truth. Freedom comes with no guarantees, no map, no final destination. So what's the point? Why embrace something so heavy, so lonely, and so uncertain? That question brings us to the final and most profound insight of Sartre's work, one that reframes freedom not as burden, but as salvation. Let's explore it next. At the end of it all, Sartre leaves us with a truth so difficult, so raw, and yet so full of potential that most people will spend their entire lives avoiding it. You are nothing more than the sum of your choices, and nothing less. There is no destiny coming to rescue you. No inner true self buried deep inside, waiting to be discovered like some hidden treasure. There is no cosmic plan that guarantees things will work out. There is only the cold, radical fact that you exist, and that from this existence you must build essence, not passively, not eventually, but now, always now. This is not a punishment. It's not cruelty. It's a gift, a brutal one, yes, but a gift nonetheless. Because within this terrifying freedom lies something most people never taste: real authorship, real power. Not the power to control outcomes or escape pain or avoid consequence, but the power to respond, to shape, to say, this is who I will be. Not because anyone told me, not because my past demands it, not because I am supposed to, but because I chose it, fully aware, fully awake. Sartre doesn't offer comfort, he offers clarity. You are free, condemned to be, yes, but also invited to be. And that invitation is open every moment. Even now, in this very second, you are shaping yourself through how you are listening, how you are thinking, how you are reacting. You are never not creating yourself. The tragedy, Sartre would say, is not that life is hard. The tragedy is that most people spend it pretending they are not free, trading the pain of responsibility for the dull ache of passivity. They build prisons out of excuses and then complain about the walls. They dream of change but refuse the cost, the death of the old self. But the person who chooses to live in truth, in good faith, discovers something most never will: that the pain of freedom is nothing compared to the regret of never claiming it. That the anguish of responsibility is also the birthplace of dignity. That there is no greater peace than the one that comes from knowing, I chose this. I am the author of this life. This is the final paradox of Sartre's thought, that in the absence of meaning, we are gifted the power to create it. That in the silence of the universe, we are given the voice to speak ourselves into being. That the weight of freedom, which feels at first like a curse, is in truth the only path to real liberation. And now, that choice is yours. Not in theory, right now. The video is ending, but your life continues. Who will you be after this? What will you stop pretending you can't do? What lie will you stop telling yourself? And more importantly, what truth will you now dare to live? Let us know in the comments. What excuse are you ready to let go of? And what's one thing you're choosing today, not because it's easy, but because it's honest? And don't stop here. The next video is waiting. And if you've come this far, you already know it's important. Keep going. You're not just watching, you're transforming.